coming from working, like when I worked with Vanguard with client services, what I learned as a performer, it's just preparation, delivery, execution. So if I'm speaking to a client, I find that confidence, creative space in my brain that allows me to just communicate effectively and be comfortable and just let who I am come through.
Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, I interview peak performing innovators in the creative, social impact, and earth conservation spaces who are working to change the world. This episode is brought to you by Brain FM. Brain FM combines the best of music and neuroscience to help you relax, focus, meditate, and even sleep. I love it and have been using it to write, create, and do some of my deepest work. Because you're a listener of the show, you can get a free trial. Head over to brain.fm/innovative mindset to check it out. If you decide to subscribe, you can get 20% off with the coupon code Innovative Mindset, all one word. And now, let's get to the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg. I'm super thrilled that you're here, and I'm finding that I'm going to have to move around a little bit. I'm on travel, so I am recording this podcast at a studio that is not mine, and you know how things are always a little bit all over the place and kerfuffled when you're not in your home space. And so that was Lane Stowe. That's this week's guest, laughing his beautiful bass laugh. We're going to talk a lot about being a bass to Lane Stowe in a second, but let me tell you about him because he is amazing. He is a 1990 graduate of the Ithaca College of Music. He's the current bass vocalist with the Uptown Vocal Jazz Quartet, and he's a new member of the Philosopher's Tones, the group that I lead and manage. He's also a freelance musician who's worked with Natalie Cole, Orleans, New York Voices, Jack DeJohnette, Kathy Lee Gifford, and Joe Piscopo, among others. He grew up in Woodstock, New York, where he was influenced by musicians such as Tony Levin, Mike Manieri, David Sanborn, one of my favorites, Paul Butterfield, Levon Helm, and many others. Lane, I'm so thrilled that you are taking the time to be here on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
My absolute pleasure. Good afternoon.
Wow. So there's so many questions that I want to ask you. And you know, it's funny. We just did this. We the first time we chatted on the phone, it ended up being like a 3-hour conversation just because we had all sorts of fun things to say to each other. But the thing that I'm really struck by, you're a singer, you're a musician, and you have this other practical side. In fact, I've heard you say that you're a musician with a day gig. And I know many professional musicians use their skills and talents in other arenas. I'd love it if you talk a little bit, jumping right in, about how you combine that very creative, sort of innovative you, the musician part of you, with all the other aspects of your work in life.
Sure. I mean, I can just pretty much go back to starting where I grew up. You know, both of my parents were music teachers. My brother is currently a music teacher in upstate New York. He also went to Ithaca, and we overlapped 1 year together at Ithaca where we were both music ed majors. Wow. I was a euphonium major, if you can imagine that. And during my first year at Ithaca, I kind of realized, all right, I don't want to be a music teacher. I don't want to, I enjoy music so much. I'm like, I don't want to have to like do music to eat. So after my first year at Ithaca, when I went back, I changed my major a little bit. I switched to voice performance because I always wanted to be a singer. Mm-hmm. And I took a business management minor. So that way that kept me from, having to be frustrated about, okay, what am I going to do with my life if my music career doesn't work out? You know, am I going to be the guy at Arby's saying, do you want fries with that? So
nothing wrong with that. I love fries.
Nothing wrong with that. And I love Arby's. Nothing wrong with that. But it was more of I knew, and I remember being a euphonium major, and I remember sitting in my room one day saying, okay, if I want to be a backup singer for Roberta Flack or Stevie Wonder, how is being a euphonium major going to help me get there? Mm-hmm. And I was very lucky that when I switched to voice, I studied with a professor by the name of Angus Godwin. And Mr. Godwin was a great professor of voice because he recognized all styles. He knew I wanted to sing jazz. He knew I wanted to sing R&B. He used the same breathing technique that my euphonium teacher used. So it was just like this perfect matchup for me to work with him. And he's like, I don't care what style of music you do. I just care that you sing it correctly. So he's the one who helped me find my voice. I also had a chance to work with Steve Brown, a great jazz professor at Ithaca College. That's where I got to know Dave Riley, who also led the Ithaca College Vocal Jazz Ensemble, from which the New York Voices came. So as a business major, music major, once I got out of college, I focused on, okay, what do I want to do? When I got out, the first thing that happened was the Gulf War. So there were no jobs. I couldn't get the job at Arby's saying, do you want fries with that? So I just started gigging with my brother. So we would just do duo gigs, like, corporate events, school events, like if they had like a faculty dinner, things like that. And from that, I really started developing not just my jazz voice, but I just pretty much self-taught myself how to play flugelhorn. Then as I got a day gig, I was still playing music on the weekends. I used to work for companies like J.C. Penney in management. Then I worked for Prudential Investments, the Vanguard Group, when I lived in Pennsylvania. So I've had a chance to work for some great companies, AAA. And now I'm actually down here in Alexandria, Virginia, and I work for Deloitte. I work for them as a project manager on a government contract. So I still do that as my quote unquote day gig. And on the weekends, if I'm not gigging with Uptown Vocal Jazz or the Philosopher's Tones, I do a lot of freelance work. I work with a band in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania called Cruise Control. From when I lived up there, I've just kept working with them, and we just do corporate events, weddings. I work locally freelance with a guy named Ryan Forster with the Ryan Forster Band. So we play all around the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. And I also, from time to time before COVID, I was doing a jazz church gig on Sunday mornings for the Center for Spiritual Living Metro here in Arlington. So that's how I've pretty much just kind of found that balance. And I find that balance has been very beneficial because when I'm at work, I feel like, all right, how can I do my job more creatively? And when I'm playing music, it's okay. How do I make sure that I'm doing everything by the book, structured, but either one, they don't bleed too much into the other. I've learned as a musician, I'm the guy who gets to the gig an hour early, checks out all the logistics, all that, make sure musicians in advance have what they need. That I've learned from working in the business world. Being creative in my job with Deloitte or in previous jobs where people have asked me, hey, Lane, can you help me brainstorm on something? And being able to think out of the box, I got that from being from the music side.
See, and I love that you said that this notion, you said something that I think is very interesting. You said they don't bleed into one another very much, but then you just went ahead and described ways in which they do. In fact, it sounds like you use that creative essence part of you to inform the work that you're doing. And as far as at Deloitte, and the question that I have for you about that, which is fabulous, and I'm grateful that you gave that full rundown, because first of all, some of the people you've worked with, I'm like, yay, these are my favorites. But also it shows that you can do both, that you can have both the creative side of you really flourish and also sort of the business and more practical side. Not that music isn't practical. So the question I have for you about that is, how do you think, how do I put this? Creative problem solving is very fascinating to me. How can we think outside the box? When you're working at your day gig, as you put it, how much do you use that part of you? And also, and this is a tougher question, how much buy-in do you have from the people you work for to be able to use that creative part of you?
I'm really thankful because right now, the project that I'm working on, they're very much into that I have that creative part in my, my repertoire, so to speak. Coming from working, like when I worked with Vanguard with client services, what I learned as a performer, it's just preparation, delivery, execution. So if I'm speaking to a client, I find that confidence, creative space in my brain that allows me to just communicate effectively and be comfortable and just let who I am come through. And I think from that, people pick up that I'm very creative, spontaneous, and they'll ask me questions like, hey, Lane, help me think this through from A to B. What do you think about this? Or as a sounding board? Because sometimes we get so linear in terms of the only way from point A is a straight line to point B. And sometimes you have to take that curve or that other angle to get there, because if you don't, you miss out on something important. And I think having that creative space to kind of think that way, to be analytical and creative, I think that it's a very big plus in terms of having that in corporate America. As an example, going back to when I worked at Vanguard, when I interviewed with the Vanguard Group 20 years ago, I had my resume and all my previous positions. And the person interviewing me goes, I've got a question I'm just dying to ask you. I'm like, what? He goes, you're a music major? I was like, yeah, I was a music major at Ithaca College. He goes, well, we have a band and a choir here that we do to support the United Way. And
Wow.
my whole interview was all about that.
Wow.
So I want to believe, even though I was hired and worked there for 5 years and loved it, that had a lot to do with me being hired, because I ended up becoming the co-conductor that year. So it was kind of like, okay, we got a ringer here. But I love the fact that they recognized, and that the company recognized, the importance of having musicians, because there were a ton of musicians that worked there. It was very close to Westchester University, and Vanguard used to recruit music majors because of how they prepare, how they think, having that creative energy. And when I found that out, I was like, okay, that's something I want to take with me wherever I go. And I still to this day have never forgotten that. And that was one of the most rewarding experiences for me, where I truly combined my music life and my day gig life, my business life, conducting the band and choir. We were the biggest supporter of the United Way in Philadelphia. So we
Wow.
did performances. We were one of the first groups to perform at the Kimmel Center when it first opened. They did a huge kickoff for Philadelphia United Way, and we were the featured entertainment. So that's something I'll never forget.
That's so cool. I love that there here's this huge company, Vanguard, that realizes the value of the arts and music and creativity. I think that's phenomenal. And when you're in that space, when you were working there and also nourishing and nurturing your life since then, this is a sort of a what if question. How would you, if you were king, how would you nurture that creative impulse in others in the business world or not? What do you think we need to do to to mine that creativity, that to really access that creative genius that lives in every one of us?
I think the first thing is A, don't be afraid of it. And B, just embrace it. I work with some people who are very, very analytical, to the point where just having a regular conversation with them, it's almost like they feel like it has to have this structure and this formality. And it's almost like sometimes it's like they're afraid to laugh,
Mm-hmm.
because they're so, whether it's ingrained, what have you. And I think once you can tap into that other side, I mean, to flip it around, I used to be very afraid of becoming analytical, especially when I first decided to be a business major. It was like, okay, accounting. All right, let's try this. And
Mm.
I was like, when I first did it, I knew right away I didn't want to be an accountant, because I sucked at it. But I learned from it, and I learned what I liked about being in the business world. And the thing that really tapped into me and helped me find that was doing things like, I took one course called Interviewing and Field Research.
Hmm.
And I remember my friend Noreen was also a music major, business minor. She took the class with me as well. So we were the only two music majors in the class, and the professor loved us because we did, like, you had to do practice interviews. You had to write a scenario where you're interviewing somebody for a job. And we went way off the creative deep end, to the point where the professor was like, man, I wish I had videotaped you guys doing your interviews. Because we just decided, like, it was like, hey, let's come up with the craziest jobs that we can think of. And she thought of me as like, okay, you're going to be a heavy metal singer for the band Blonde Dissonance. So I come in for the interview wearing a blonde wig. And I said, okay, you're going to be the first female football player in the NFL. So she comes in wearing my football jersey, and I borrowed some shoulder pads from somebody. But it was just, okay, here's how you can do this and be creative.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, for me, was what really helped me. That was like, for me, I remember that vividly. It was like that light bulb went off, like, okay, I have a chance to embrace both sides here. It's okay to be creative in an analytical world. It's okay to be analytical in a creative world, but don't be afraid to embrace both of those things. You will eventually just naturally find your balance.
I love that you said that. That notion of not being afraid to embrace both. And in fact, running towards them because they make you a well rounded person is so powerful. And I love that you did that. That the football player and blonde dissonance. Let me ask you, within that framework of, bringing that creativity to the analytical part and the sort of the analytical to the creative part, how do you think that's impacted you in the music work that you're doing today?
Oh, I think it's definitely given me a sense of just accountability. I think structure, logistical planning. I mean, there's so many things now that I look back and I go, oh my God, I didn't realize then how much that had an influence,
Hmm.
and even just in terms of preparing for something, the same way that you do your due diligence, doing a deep dive on a project. I mean, I think if anything, and maybe this is just my balance, but it really feels like to me that the analytical world and the creative world are a lot closer than people realize,
Mm-hmm.
and how
Mm-hmm.
much they are already blending in corporate America, in the music industry. You're seeing it firsthand. I mean, obviously, when you look at today's pop music, you can practically smell the corporate business part of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at companies that are thriving, why are they thriving? You look at these businesses now where people have, I mean, ping pong tables at work and pinball machines and video games. Why? Because it taps into another part of their brain. They know that, okay, if this person is very good at ping pong, then that helps them focus. It helps them concentrate. It's an out of the box way of people realizing that.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for a company that had a ping pong table, and every day, like lunchtime, you had to wait to play because it was just this thing where you found this energy with other people that you would never have found and then you go into a meeting with these same people and you just have that, like, you'd be a little bit amped up,
Mm-hmm.
but you also went in there like, okay, let's work together. We just played ping pong and we really just locked horns playing ping pong. How do we take that, and let's take that energy and harness it, and let's work on this project.
Right, and it's also a sense of camaraderie. If you have that togetherness, even if it's based in competition, like a ping pong gang or something, you are still in a position to see each other as more than just coworkers or colleagues. And I think there's something really fascinating about that. What are your thoughts on that? How do we bring people closer together, ping pong being one of them? What about through creative means? Like, for example, I do these work in harmony workshops where I go into corporations and I teach the people there to sing. That's my thing. And they start out with, a set of disparate people, and then they end up 2 hours later singing in three-part harmony. So, and they're always changed by that. We're changed by our association and interaction with music. So what are your thoughts about how we might cultivate more creative thinking and more creativity in the corporate world? I can't even say just corporate America, corporate world. What are your thoughts on that?
I think when it comes to the corporate world, and I think it's part of it is kind of just an organic process.
Mm-hmm.
But as more and more people, and you're seeing it now with the younger generations, are coming into the workforce, they're coming in with a much broader background and
Mm-hmm.
broader interests and diversity
Mm-hmm.
than what we had in our, I hate to say it, our generation. I know, get off my lawn. But you see such a difference. And I work
Right.
with these kids who are younger kids now, and just even how they dress, just the way they think through things, you can sense that they've got that bug in their head already about thinking differently and being creative.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing that generational gap closing. Gone are the days where everybody wore the suit and tie to work and you did this and you talked a certain way and you said, yes, boss. And no. Now it's much more, you're wanting to understand people. I'll think of it this way. I think of it like a funnel. 30 years ago, a funnel. Everything was poured into it and all had to come out a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Now that funnel's gone. If anything, it's the other way around. It's okay, let's bring these people in. What do they bring to the table? What can we tap into that they may have something that we've never thought of? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just the whole process of thinking of ideas. That to me is where the creative process has really, enveloped the corporate world. What companies thrive, which companies fail. You can
Mm-hmm.
almost pinpoint it to that. It's how you think differently. And part of thinking differently is what? Being creative.
Absolutely. You're singing my song. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it's something that I think the more we progress, the more we're going to keep blending those two things. And yet you said something that I think is really interesting, to sort of jumping topics just a little bit. You were saying about the current state of pop music, and that you can sort of see the corporate thumbprint on successful pop music. How does that work? What are your thoughts on, is it a limit to creativity, or is creativity thriving even through this corporate lens? What is your thought on how we're blending current music and the corporate world?
Okay, I'm going to be total get off my lawn moment here, but I have
Oh,
to.
no,
I'm
no, no,
52
please.
years old, and I'm not going to hold back.
Fair
If
enough.
you if you think about music in, I'm going to use say the early 80s, which is now classified as yacht rock. You
Yacht rock.
had,
Okay.
yes, you had this, even though it was top of the pop charts and everything else, there was still a craft to writing songs, arranging, just the overall acoustic process of music.
Mm-hmm.
There was true harmonies and musicians supported each other. I mean, I think about like Michael McDonald, James Ingram, Kenny Loggins,
Mm.
Paul Simon, Patty Austin. They all worked on Luther Vandross. They all worked. They paid their dues as background singers.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this organic thing that happened as pop music began to evolve, where it was about the music pre-video. As a matter of fact, it was the first video on MTV was Video Killed the Radio Star. Absolutely. Think about, draw that line of where you had singer-songwriters, even going back before that, James Taylor, Carole King, the 60s, Jimi Hendrix, The Who, all these different bands and artists, Janis Joplin, they wrote their own songs. They had a unique sound, a unique, niche in pop music.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the documentary on Clive Davis a couple months ago, and his documentary, to me, it absolutely tells the story of the music business. Because here's a guy who I have the utmost respect for, because he's done two incredible things. One, when you think about the artists that he discovered and got on, major record labels for, and how that influenced music when he was with Columbia Records into the 70s, then he created Arista Records and had guys like Barry Manilow, just always kept that type of music on the charts. He knew what was good, but he also knew where the talent was. I mean, come on, Whitney Houston. Now you're seeing in pop music, everything has a similar sound. You have all the different boy band, K-pop, whatever you want to call it. If you gave me a blindfold and said, okay, we're going to play Rihanna, we're going to play Sierra, we're going to play whoever, they all have a similar sound. So it's not about the artist anymore. It's about the sound. And, I hate to say it, but how many of these bands could perform? How many of these groups could perform during a power failure? They can, because it's all electronic. And that art of writing songs has now become more about, okay, what's going to sell the best?
Mm.
It's not about the talent. Back in the day, you heard a James Taylor song, wherever you were, you knew it was James Taylor. You went to the record store to find the album. Now it's, okay, well, I guess we need to make a record to support the video. And let's just get these K-pop guys. And no, that guy's too ugly to be a pop star. And that to me is what has just destroyed it. You look at the early years of American Idol. I couldn't watch it because I remember Simon Cowell saying to somebody, well, you've got a fantastic voice, but you're too fat to be a pop star.
Wow.
There's so many things wrong with that statement, because it shouldn't be about how you look. It should be about the talent you have and how you sound. And that's where pop music has become so corporate now. It's about how much can we sell. It's not about finding and cultivating. I mean, you watch the Grammys, and I'll tell you right now, I will take Layla Hathaway with laryngitis over Beyonce. Why? Beyonce looks great, but Layla Hathaway sings circles around her. And Layla Hathaway always gets her Grammys prior to airtime. Why? Because it's, all right, we got to hit that 18 to 49 precious demographic. So we've got to just ram J-Lo and, whoever rump shaking on TV. What does that have to do with singing? It's okay. The classical people, sorry, you only get like 1 minute of airtime because, hey, we got to get you out of the way. We got to get, this K-pop or this boy band, got to get them their time on the air at that, got to get that revenue. That's what's wrong. And I don't see it changing. And to me, I remember the moment when I felt the paradigm shift. April 7th, 1994. Do you remember
Wow.
what happened that day?
No, I do not.
Kurt Cobain died.
Ah.
And music took a paradigm shift because the thing I loved about grunge was the ultimate homage to classic rock. It was guys making music, not caring about all the material stuff. Give me my flannel shirt, give me my jeans, give me my guitar, and let's just play some music. And that was why Woodstock 94 was such a great tribute to the original Woodstock. You look at the bands that played there, you still had original acts like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Then you had younger groups like Green Day and Soundgarden that were that same mindset in terms of music. When grunge went away after Kurt Cobain died because he was the face of grunge, we kind of went, okay, Hootie and the Blowfish, all right, they're still playing instruments, still good. Then we went into like the whole Mickey Mouse Club of pop music. All the kids that were on the Mickey Mouse Club became pop stars. And everything started to sound the same. Christina sounded like Britney. And then you have people like Mariah Carey who were already established trying to keep up with Britney and Christina. And it just got, then we went to like 98 Degrees, O-Town, Backstreet, NSYNC, and we've never recovered because it became more and more about visual, less and less about the music, and more about selling albums. And you have so many great, talented musicians that should be getting Grammys. And that's why I love indie music, because indie music still represents the ability to write songs, have a gift of playing and singing music and doing it for the love of the music, not about how many albums you're going to sell or getting the video made or whatever you want to call it, reaching the 18 to 49 demographic. There's still an art form, a craft to that. And then, of course, as somebody who's a music major, I say to myself, okay, if I'm a classical voice major and I'm just going to use a school like SUNY Fredonia, a music school, or Hart or Curtis or Juilliard, I'm a classical music major. Mm-hmm. I get out of school. If I'm lucky, I get with an opera company, or if I do musical theater, I'm doing, maybe in a touring company. But the odds of them getting to Broadway or to the Met, we know the odds are not very good. There's a lot of competition, but you have all these talented singers. And then I'm a classical singer and I flip on the TV and I'm watching, I can't even think of, who is it Cardi B, that's it. And I'm watching Cardi B shaking her ass on TV, pole dancing on the Grammys. And I'm saying, what the hell? Why am I going to music school if I could just do that to have fame and fortune? And I have the utmost respect for the students who still do and who take that very seriously, and the professors who still continue to teach kids how to sing and play instruments correctly and understand the history of music, because it's becoming an endangered species. It's becoming more about, okay, at some point, some school in music is going to have where you can major in pop music, where it's about the image and it's about the visual and it's about how to market yourself. And do you have to sing? Not necessarily. You just have to know how to market yourself. And that's where we are so upside down, especially in America, England. You go to countries like Japan, jazz musicians in Japan are rock stars. They get the same hype, same publicity, same marketing that we have in the States for pop stars. That's what they have for all styles of music in other countries. And we need to get back to that. If not, we're going to get to a point where people will be listening to feedback and say, oh man, what a great song. We're not that far away.
Oh my goodness. I hope that's not true. So, okay. All of that, it's interesting because you say you're talking about K-pop stars coming over here. K-pop is Korean, right? So
right.
They may not, like, how does that work? They farm themselves out to other countries? What I don't know. BTS is the only K-pop band that I know of. How does that reconcile? How do they can they not be stars in Korea because other musicians are, or is there something else in play there?
It goes back to your original question. Corporate America, corporate world. How can we market these guys? Where can they make the most money? Where can they get the most publicity? Where can they get the most fame?
So, if you could change it, what would you do? And what do you think we need to do moving forward to perhaps, I'm not saying bring back, I don't know if we can bring anything back, but how about exploring anew some of these other musical art forms?
Okay, first thing they need to do is make me the president of the Grammy Association. So we're going to do this. If it was on my
Done.
planet, here's how we do this. I think the first thing that they need to do, and I specifically mean this, and I would love it if Neil Portnoy at the Grammys actually heard this. They need to do two separate ceremonies. They need to first do one in DC at the Kennedy Center, do it on PBS, recognize all the art forms of music that you have disregarded on the CBS primetime program. Give them their space to perform, give them the recognition they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sorry, but I would love to watch Pat Metheny on the Grammys again. I
Sure.
would love to watch Diana Krall on the Grammys again, and all these incredible young artists who may get nominated but don't get their opportunity. I think you need to give the Broadway musicals, the opera, country music, bluegrass, all of it. It deserves more recognition. And that's where you have to start, because now we've become, everything else has become secondary. And because of that, kids have lost interest in other art forms. The irony is, oh, well, we have the Save the Music program for music education. So you can become a music teacher making $40,000 a year with a student loan of $200,000. And meanwhile, you can watch Cardi B on TV making millions of dollars, throwing $100 bills in the audience. That's got to change. You know, that's step one. Step two, music schools need to have our support. Music in public schools, that needs to be a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sorry, I don't remember anybody who I went to high school with playing in the NFL or in the NBA. But we put so much emphasis on sports, and we put so much emphasis on all the other subjects. You know, I know that taking trigonometry helps me in some way, but I have yet to encounter a professional trigonometrist, if that's a word.
I have no
I
idea.
know a lot of great math teachers, but music, art has to have the exact same level of appreciation and support. Because if not, this is why it's fading out in public schools. Kids don't have interest in being in orchestra anymore or being in band. Not when they can play football? Oh, of course not. Oh, I can't do band and sports? Well, I'm going to do sports. That's what's happening. I went to a high school, Iowa High School in upstate New York. Our marching band used to do the Macy's Day Parade. We used to do NFL games. Matter of fact, in 1974, our band did a halftime show at Shea Stadium for a Jets game in pouring rain. And this is when they used to show the halftime shows on TV. And Kurt Dowdy, legendary sportscaster, called our marching band the bravest marching band in America. Our marching band no longer exists then because for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously the area where I grew up was not as thriving as it used to be, but there's not the emphasis on music education anymore. It's becoming more and more an afterthought, and you're seeing the result all the way up to current day pop music, because you're seeing it doesn't take talent to be a pop musician anymore. It's how do you look, how do you dance? We can always fix you in the studio with auto-tune. That's the problem.
So what's interesting about, because I totally hear what you're saying, and I've always found this interesting that from the first time I read, they did a study, the NIH did a study that music, especially playing a musical instrument, uses like every part of your brain. It uses all four hemispheres. It uses so much of your brain to be able to do the memory part of remembering, do the tactile part, crossing hemispheres, particularly on instruments where you use both hands. All of those things come together in playing music, and yet we don't value it. And I get that the money is part of it, right? I get that the corporate world is looking at it from the perspective of how can we sell more records. But why do you think, what do you think accounts for not valuing that part of music, that it is so good for you to be a musician, even if you're not a professional musician, to play a musical instrument, to avail yourself of that incredible growth potential inside you?
I think it still goes back to, okay, what's going to make us the most money? I hate to say it, I hate to harp on that, but I think that that mindset now that you've seen permeate our society is, I remember VH1 back in the day, they used to say music education equals brain power. I haven't seen that commercial in years because it became an afterthought. So the people who do go to the music schools and where school districts still have that emphasis on music, you're seeing that and you're seeing people thrive in that. Yes, a lot of music colleges are still really all about using that, all four parts of the brain. But you're seeing enrollment shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because it's becoming less and less. It's becoming more and more an afterthought. One of the things that I learned how to do, and I had to do it because of necessity, was I sprained my wrist pretty badly, my right wrist. It's probably about 20 years ago. And I had a gig where I had to play trumpet. I learned how to play trumpet left-handed instead of right-handed. So I can play trumpet using either hand now. I am completely I can switch off on a song, start playing it, right hand on my trumpet, switch to my left hand, switch back. Sometimes for fun, I don't do it well, but I can play two trumpets at the same time. But I take pride in that because I had to learn
Wow.
how to do that out of necessity.
Sure.
And I had to do it in short notice. And growing up, and this is something that I credit my mom for. I'm one of those guys who has perfect pitch that people hate. So growing up, my mother, I would ride in the car and I used to love listening like Chuck Mangione. And she would notice as I was riding in the car, as I was listening, I was doing the fingerings with my right hand. Mm-hmm. So that's how she knew I had perfect pitch. Because she picked up on the fact that she was also a trumpet player. She knew, okay, he's doing those fingerings. And one time she made me pick up my trumpet and just play what you were playing in your head in the car. And so she knew right away. And because of that, it really helped me in terms of the challenge of learning other instruments, being the utility guy in marching band. Okay, this week I'll play tuba, next week I'll play trumpet, and the week after that I'll play trombone. And it was very much that thought process of learning to play the instrument, challenging yourself, as you said, using all parts of the brain. And now that's not, sadly, it's not what it used to be in our society. I mean, when you think back to 1700s, 1800s, classical music. I mean, Mozart was oh God, I hate Mozart. Please forgive me for saying this, and please don't roll in your grave too hard. But Mozart was like I don't want to say Kanye. I'm trying to think of somebody else.
Just say Bad Boy.
The John Bon Jovi or something of our day. He was a bad boy, but he was a talented bad boy.
Sure.
Kanye could be in my backyard and I wouldn't go outside to watch him. I'd probably pour water on him from my deck.
Oh my.
But think about it. What talent, when you break it down in terms of musical talent, what talent does Kanye West have?
Are you actually asking me?
I am asking you that question because there's a clip on YouTube of him singing Bohemian Rhapsody. Oh, it's a must watch if you're a musician. Wow. It gives Yoko credibility.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I'll have to put the link to that in the show notes. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know Kanye West's work really at all. So when you ask that question, I don't know how to answer it. So the thing is, though, don't you think though music is subjective? Like you might not be into Kanye West, but somebody who loves Kanye West might think he's a genius. And what room is there for that, for both of those very radically different interpretations of something that is subjective?
The difference is history. The person who thinks Kanye West is the best thing since sliced bread, the odds are that they probably aren't even familiar with like Miles Davis, Ray Charles. Oh no, they know Ray Charles because Kanye sampled him. Sorry. John Coltrane. They're not familiar with the history of music leading up to why Kanye West is a genius. And that's the problem. The history's forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I told you my Peter Frampton story last night, and I'll share it again. You know, there's somebody who I was wearing a t-shirt. I have a t-shirt that says "Got Frampton," and the person who came up to me said, "What's Frampton? Not who, but what."
My goodness.
That's the generational gap. So more. I mean, there are a lot of kids who still do know, you know, the history of music. But when you say Kanye West is, you know, the greatest thing since sliced bread, right now, fine. 20 years from now, are we still going to be listening to Kanye West? And I use Beyonce, Crazy in Love, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when that song was on every 2 seconds? How many people still listen to it? How many people still listen to Christina Aguilera, Genie in a Bottle?
Okay, so here's the thing about that. It's a great question. When we're talking about what was popular 20 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever, it might not be popular today, but isn't music and the performance of it an evolutionary process? Should we not expect the process to ebb and flow as new musicians come in, as new styles of music sort of, grow and then ebb? Don't we expect that's happened in the fine art world? Certainly, I look at, and I'm a, don't get me started on it, but Barnett Newman and Rothko and all of those people who are like, I'm going to slap a square on a canvas and call it art, and it's going to sell for $43 million, right? So somebody out there goes, oh, this is amazing, and it sells at Sotheby's for $43 million. Isn't that kind of the same thing that music is doing? That we have some things that people like me and you maybe would go, oh, this isn't very good at all. But other people are looking at it going, this is the best thing ever.
I'm going to say yes and no, and I'll explain why. You look at a band like the Rolling Stones. They've been around, I mean, pretty much since Gregorian chants were created, the Rolling Stones have been around, at least Keith Richards. But they have staying power. Mm-hmm. We still listen to Satisfaction now the way we did in 1965. Why? Because there's something about it that is classical. You tell me that Karen Carpenter's voice comes on FM radio or AM radio or satellite radio, you know right away who it is. And you still hear people, who know the song, We've Only Just Begun. There's an ebb and flow because certain styles of music, it's a talent level, it's a creative level. That's why you see these bands or groups like James Taylor, they're still around because people respect the talent. I use Beyonce, Crazy in Love. Beyonce will probably still be around in 20 years, but we won't listen to her library of music the way we listen to these other artists. Look at Madonna. Madonna is still here. Look how she's ebbed and flowed. And now, what is she focusing on now more in her career? Her older catalog. Why? Because it had substance. And that's what it comes down to in pop music right now. You have the ebb and flow because you have some people that always recognize the substance. That's what always carries over. You have as you said, your fad music. It's popular now, not popular in 20 years. Don't believe me? Ask where Flock of Seagulls is these days.
Oh, I still listen to Iran. No, but okay. But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. You mentioned Diana Krall, so I'm going to talk about her husband, Elvis Costello. You know what's interesting about that? I remember reading an article with him where he was complaining, actually, that no one wanted to listen to his new stuff, that all they wanted to listen to was his old stuff. And he's like, I'm so tired of playing Allison. I don't want to play that song anymore. But my audience is still stuck in listening, in wanting to hear my old stuff. I've moved on, but they haven't. And so on some level, he himself was saying that, hey, I've grown as a musician. I've changed. I've ebbed and flowed. Come with me on this journey. And his audience didn't want to come with him on that journey, in part because what they wanted was the older stuff. How do you reconcile that with this notion that we're not listening to music the same way we did 20 years ago or 30 years ago?
5-word answer. Video killed the radio star. When you listen to Allison, that came out, 77, 78?
78, I think.
78. Was there a video for it?
No.
So when you listen to it, you have a memory of your own about where you were or why you loved that song. Did you kiss a girl the first time you heard it? You have your own memory. Now you are told based on the video of what you're supposed to think of a song. So when people say, oh, like when like I'm a huge Steely Dan fan, and I actually saw Elvis open for Steely Dan a couple years ago. When I hear Steely Dan Asia, I don't think of a video. I think about where I was the first time I heard it, the first time I looked at the album cover, the first time I read the album liner notes, and it resonates with me because I have my own visual memory of it. And it's a nostalgic thing for people. I think, and a lot of that goes back to the fact that now everything is so cookie cutter visual that, of course, when you see somebody perform, look how many people in the audience try to do the dance moves or whatever they do. Like, that's because you're being told how to think of a song. So when Elvis Costello plays Allison, everybody in their mind goes back to, oh yeah. It's like when James Turner plays Walking Man. And I love that he embraces that and he tells the stories about the songs because it goes back to a time when it was about the music, not the visual, not the, okay, this guy's got to fit the suit. It was about the music.
Interesting. I agree with you, and yet I'm still on that space where Prince was the same way. I remember seeing, Purple Rain came out in the early mid 80s. And of course, many of us loved the movie and the album and blah, blah, blah. And I remember seeing him in concert for that tour and the time opened for him. And they did the same dance moves from the movie. And Prince, when he sang Darling Nikki, did the same dance moves on stage. Slower, because how could you do all that stuff night after night?
Yeah.
But we in the, the 30,000 of us in the arena, we loved it. And not just because he was doing the same dance moves as from the movie, but because the music was phenomenal. I mean, that was, to me, I can talk about, For You, Dirty Mind, Controversy, blah, blah, blah.
Black Album.
1999. There are so many of his albums that to me represent my sort of growing up, my childhood. But when I think about Purple Rain, that album is seminal to me. It's so close to my heart. And those songs speak to that part of me, but they were video. They were, they were the movie. And yet how old was I when it came out? I was 16, roughly 15, 16 when it came out. And there were plenty of videos from the movie on MTV, et cetera, et cetera. But I still hold that album incredibly close to my heart and didn't follow his later music as well. Not because he was worse, because he's Prince, he was genius, but because that impacted me. And so now I wonder, is it the music that we hear when we're growing up that has the most impact on us? What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, and again, I'm going to answer this generationally. Think about when we grew up listening to music. How did we listen to it?
Well, I was sneaking my sister's LPs and listening to them. And then as soon as MTV was on, I was watching videos as well as
Bingo.
listening on the radio.
You just said the word watch.
But you know what? But they were both, right? I mean, weren't you watching the Gestalt? The video by itself is not very interesting without the music. I love the music first, but I like to see those interpretations. To me, it's kind of like the difference between reading a book and the graphic novel of that book. Sort of the graphic. This is what they decided you should envision when you see this scene or whatever. When you imagine this scene. But it's just another art form. Does that negate the music in any way, or is it just another facet of the music being brought to a wider audience?
I think we're at the far end of the spectrum.
Okay.
Because what you just said was when we first saw videos, the music complemented the video. Like the video was not interesting unless you had the music.
Right.
Now, Cardi B can shake her ass on a pole dance as a video, and there could just be like static, and it's still going to get watched like crazy. Why? Because who cares about the music? Cardi B shaking her ass. That's the problem. When we grew up, we listened to music on 8-track, cassette, albums.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you watched an artist on Solid Gold, or if you stayed up and watched the Midnight Special. It wasn't rammed down our
Right.
throats so you could appreciate the music. Like I said before, you heard a song on the radio and you're like, whoa. Like I vividly remember the first time I heard Carly Simon, Nobody Does It Better.
Oh.
I remember exactly where I was. The time of year was an overcast Saturday, Kingston, New York, sitting with my dad in his station wagon in the ShopRite parking lot while my mom ran in the store, and that song came on. And when I hear that song, boom, I am right back there because it wasn't a video with it. It was, where was I? It resonated.
Hmm.
And even if you made a video to that now, the video would not interest me. Do you remember when Bob Seger made a video for Night Moves?
No.
He made a video. He recorded Night Moves on what, like 77, 78. In 1994, he decided to make a video of the song with the original song, but put a video to it. And it actually starred Matt LeBlanc from Friends.
Oh.
And people don't remember it because that's not how they want to remember the song. They remember the song. The video was like, okay, that's nice and all. And I think it's pretty cool that you decided to do that, but it didn't like change the perception or how the song resonated with people.
Right.
And I think now we've gone to that far end where music needed to make the video when MTV and VH1 first came out. Now we're at the point where music is secondary. It's not about, how, because hello, auto-tune. So you know right there, if you're using auto-tune to make a record, that tells you that the music is not the priority. It's the visual, it's the marketing. And that's why now when kids are saying, yeah, Kanye's a genius, why? He markets himself well, for one. B, you can watch him on your phone, your iPad, your TV, your whatever, your refrigerator. It's how it's marketed, how it's presented, how it's internalized. And the talent of songwriting and everything else in terms of pop music, it's not required anymore because it's all about the visual and it's all about presentation. And because we've gone so far on the other side of the spectrum with that, it's like, I don't know if it's ever going to go back. I mean, you still have groups like the Stones, James Taylor. You have these people who are still well-known, well-recognized, Stevie Wonder. But, I went and saw Stevie a couple of years ago, and he did a tour of the Songs in the Key of Life album. And his tour was sold out. Why? Everybody remembers that record. It was the Sgt. Pepper of African-American music.
Yeah, it's a great album for sure.
It's a fantastic album. And like, imagine if they'd done it, like, the track Village Ghetto Land on that record. Classical music style, but the lyrics rip your guts out. I don't want to see a video to that because I know when I listen to it, what it makes me think about, and that it makes me think about something. I don't go on autopilot when I listen to that. When I try to watch Rihanna on TV, on an award show program or something, I'm just like, okay, what's this big thing? What did she do that was supposed to be mind-blowing? Now, I will say this, country music to me right now is still, they're the ones that still are true and representative of their history. Because you name one country music artist that does not know the history of country music. If you ask Luke Bryan to name, people who performed the Grand Ole Opry in 1956, I guarantee you can do it because there's still that reverence and respect for the history of the music. Kids who listen to country music know, hey, yeah, Luke Bryan was inspired by, Kenny Rogers, who was inspired by Willie Nelson. They know the history, they know the lineage. And because they know that, and you look at Nashville, you can't just go down to Nashville and get by. You've got to be talented. You've got to know how to play instruments. You have to know how to sing. You have to know how to write songs. Those are the people, you have to have one or two of those qualities to become a successful country musician. Look how many songwriters live in Nashville. Look how many pop stars from back in the day moved to Nashville. That is still, to me, I have more respect for Nashville than I do the music scene in LA. I still have the utmost respect for the jazz and R&B scenes of New York, but country music is still the one that 30 years ago, same reverence. 30 years from now, I promise you, it will still have the same respect and reverence for its history and its lineage that pop music has lost. And if I'm lying, I'm dying.
Yeah, that's amen. So here's the thing. What I'm thinking of is the notion of digital music versus analog music, and we jumped into digital CDs and blah blah blah, and then just a few years ago, people went vinyl. Vinyl is where it's at, and we did go back. We started
Yep.
looking at vinyl again as a beautiful and elegant way to appreciate music, and so I can't help thinking that a lot of this is cyclical, that we're on a sort of spiral, that we keep coming back around the same place just on a different arm. And I think we will personally go back
The
to
one,
where
oh,
things
good.
were. No, go ahead.
I think the thing when you say about vinyl, that's what gives me hope. Being around Washington, D.C., I love going into the vinyl shops. And I love it even more when I go in there and I see 25-year-olds, kids in their 20s, going through vinyl like John Coltrane and, you know, Betty Carter. That gives me hope because it's like, okay, these kids have an interest. There is that interest of where the music came from. Sadly, you're not seeing that all the way across the country yet, but we're getting there. And that's what still gives me hope. But I think the mainstream of pop music needs to realize, okay, there is still an interest. How can we help feed into that? How can we help bring music history back through that? There's an avenue there of an interest. I mean, I know 8 tracks aren't going to come back, but if they did, I'd be ecstatic. Why? Because that means there's an interest, more of an interest in what came before what's out now. I still have all 4,000 of my CDs. I'll never get rid of them because A, I have stuff I couldn't find now
Right.
because it's Japanese imports, it's albums that are, impossible to find that I found on CD back in the day and paid $200 a CD for. But it's for me, it's the memory of holding that CD the same way I held an album cover. I don't want to, I know iTunes, you can read the album notes, but there's something about holding the album instead.
Mm.
And I
There,
think that's what we remember. That's what our generation definitely remembers. So when vinyl comes back, you go into a Barnes and Noble where there used to be thousands of CDs, you see a vinyl section and you say, okay, it could come back. It might be a different sound, but it will still come back with the respect of what came before it.
I certainly hope so. I mean, there. Well, and at the very least, it's ever evolving. That's one of the things that I both love and sometimes hate about music. In that, the things that you love change, and you're like, no, don't go away. But then we are a species, a creature that wants to try new things and experiment.
Yep.
So I'm hopeful that we won't lose touch with the best parts of what came before as we grow into and evolve into what's coming next.
I'm going to share a really quick story with you. I'm going to try to do this in 30 seconds or less. My mom was the biggest Ray Charles fan, and
Uh-huh.
she had every album on vinyl.
Mm.
When she passed away, I wanted to make sure that her albums were forever preserved because I know how much they meant to her. I didn't want them ending up in some like pawn shop in like Poughkeepsie.
Mm.
So I was very lucky that I went to high school with Jonathan Sanborn, David's son. So I've gotten to know David over the years, and I know he was a huge Ray Charles fan because he saw Hank Crawford, who inspired him. Hank Crawford was Ray sax player back in the day, and that's who really inspired David Sanborn to become an alto player. So I reached out to Dave through his tour manager and through Jonathan, and I was like, "Look, I have all my mom's original Ray Charles albums. I want you to have them because I want to make sure that they are forever preserved." And he was like, "Absolutely." So he played the Birchmere here in Alexandria, and I took my mom's complete Ray Charles record collection to him. And the thing that was so amazing to me was, he was blown away. He invites the whole band into the dressing room, and they were like little kids in a candy store, like in a record store, looking at all these different albums, like, "Oh my God, wow, this is awesome." And I just thought, okay, that's what it's about. It's remembering where it came from and knowing how important it is to preserve it going forward.
And that is that. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Having that appreciation and really carrying it through is so It's crucial to all of us, I think, for music and for other art forms. We owe a debt, such a debt we can never repay to those who came before us. And we can, through preserving what they did and standing on the shoulders of giants, move forward in a way that's respectful and also, in many ways, exciting and revolutionary, on top of all the exciting and revolutionary things they did. Because, that's the thing, isn't it? Elvis was exciting and revolutionary, and the people before him hated him. So,
Right.
so there's always going to be, I think, that push and pull as we evolve in creativity and in the arts in general. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you pointed that out, Lane. I think that's a lovely way of looking at it. And I could keep you here for the next 6 hours, but I think it's probably I know you once you and I get going, I'm like I have 42 other questions that I'd love to ask, but I know that you have a life and a day to get back to. I would love it if people want to know more about you and your music. Would you mind sharing where someone who wants to find you could find you?
Yes, I have an album out. It's on iTunes, Amazon, wherever you can download. It's called Have Groove Will Travel. I'm in the process of redoing my website right now, and right now even with Facebook updating and everything. But the best thing is, and I'll make sure that you have a link for the album on Amazon if you want to put the link out there, or if you,
Absolutely.
like you said, iTunes, Spotify. It's out there. It's called Lane Stowe Have Groove Will Travel. And for me, I wanted to do different styles of music. So
Mm.
I tried to do everything from gospel to doo-wop to 5-part a cappella to, R&B. It was just something that had always been on my bucket list. And it was just something I always wanted to do. And I finally had the chance to do it.
Fabulous. I'm excited. I'll definitely put that in the show notes, and then this how do I put this? By the time this episode airs, hopefully your website will be finished and we can put the link to that on the show notes as well. That way, people want to know more about you and what you're doing. We'll be able to be able to find you and listen to your music and learn more about your notion of sort of musicology. This was a kind of a master class in recent music history. I'm really grateful that you that you went there. That was so fun.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Lane, I want to, first of all, yes, thank you so much for being here. But also, I want to ask you one last question. It's a silly question, but I find that it yields some profound results. And the
Okay.
question is, yeah, I know everyone's like, "What are you asking me?"
Is it
But
like the James Lipton question?
it's a simple question, and it is this: if you had an airplane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
It would have to be a plane with a lot of fuel, because here's what I would say. I don't care if you're white, black, gay, straight, Muslim, Hindu, Protestant, whatever, dot, 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 dot. Either you can play the gig or you can't play the gig, because that is my philosophy on life. We're all equal. We're all here on the planet for a reason. Embrace the things we have in common, not the things that tear us apart. Like I said, plane with a lot of fuel.
There you go. Absolutely. I love it. And it would have to be a plane with a lot of fuel that could write in very small little letters.
Either that or it'd have to write over the whole state of Texas, one or
Right.
the other.
Or, they have those long banners now. We could just put a really long banner behind the plane and it could have all of that on there.
And you could see it all the way from Connecticut to New Jersey.
Because that's how long it would be. Lane, thank you so much again for being on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
My
It's been
pleasure.
fabulous.
Thank you so much.
This was so much fun. I love it. You'll have to come back and we'll talk more about music.
Oh, I hope so.
This is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Innovative Mindset Podcast. You've just gotten a masterclass in recent music history, and also you've heard a lot about the notion of bringing creativity to the corporate world and bringing that business sense to your creative life, that the two can coexist and in fact thrive together. I hope that you've enjoyed the show, and if you have, do me a favor, tell a friend about it. Let people know that the show exists, because we're exploring this notion of that combination between your creative life and the more practical parts of you to thrive together. Until next time, once again, this is Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you to listen, learn, laugh, and love a whole lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and if you like what you're hearing, please review it and rate it and let other people know. And if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, I'd love to meet you on patreon.com/innovative mindset. I also have lots of exclusive goodies to share just with the show's supporters there. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, keep living in your innovative mindset.